Since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, Russia's territorial ambitions have been under the spotlight. From the Baltic to the Black Sea, the Kremlin has been making moves all over Europe. This power politics was born in 1991. At that time, 15 Soviet republics declared their independence amid the collapse of the USSR. But within the KGB, the USSR Secret Service, agents refused to accept this loss of influence. Instead, they set up a strategy to prevent these states from leaving the Russian orbit and joining the European Union. Their plan? To infiltrate the ethnic or Russian-speaking minorities in these new countries, stir up claims on their identity, and help them break away. It happened in Moldova in 1992, Georgia in 2008, and Ukraine in 2014. The same method was used every time. With the support of the Russian army, separatists create self-proclaimed republics that are not recognized by the international community. They bear mysterious names, such as the Donetsk People's Republic, the Moldovan Republic of Dniester, or the Autonomous Republic of Abkhazia. To find out what lies behind these phantom states, we set out for the other side of the Iron Curtain. In Transnistria, as well as in Abkhazia, many inhabitants live in nostalgia for the USSR. A journey through the Soviet glacis, the puppet countries that serve Russia's interests and destabilize Europe. Our investigation into the pro-Russian separatist regions begins in Moldova. In 1991, this former Soviet republic gained independence, but in 1992, civil war broke out in the east of the country. It pitted the Moldovan army against a Russian-speaking separatist movement, entirely created by the KGB and supported by the Russian army. After 4 months of fighting, a ceasefire was signed. The separatists won autonomy for Transnistria. 30 years later, 1,500 Russian soldiers are still deployed there. Since Transnistria is off-limits to journalists, we pass ourselves off as tourists. The border post is guarded by Russian FSB agents. 10 minutes later, we arrive in Tiraspol, the capital. Stalinist architecture, busts of Lenin, a monument celebrating the Red Army's victory over the Nazis. Soviet decorum is omnipresent, and one feels very close to Russia here.
It's Suvorov. He was the one who created the town.
Yulia is 31. She grew up here. The young woman studied languages.
I'm working remotely as a personal assistant with a Swiss company. Also, another part-time job. We just help companies to be on the first, on the top, on the list in searching engine.
Like many young people here, Yulia has to reconcile her Russian-speaking culture with her desire for freedom and adventure. She lives with her brother, who owns an apartment in the suburbs of Tiraspol.
Да. Ну вообще я подумала о том, чтобы устроиться куда-то на работу в Кишиневе. Что-то я соскучилась за коллективом.
It's Friday, and like in most countries, Yulia is getting ready to go out with friends.
I'm preparing for a party. It's the party on the boat. It's kind of popular here. Music and nice view. Basically, I don't really put a lot of makeup, just lipstick, some, cheeks. That's it. And of course, dress.
Yulia goes out to buy a few bottles. She goes to Kvint, the largest manufacturer and distributor of liquor. Kvint produces 20 million bottles a year, a disproportionate figure for this territory of barely 500,000 inhabitants.
У нас сегодня будет вечеринка вечером, и нужны вкусняшки. Нужен алкоголь для девочек и для мальчиков. Давайте 5 бутылочек Нистру. Где-то также 5 бутылок шампанского, да?
Kvint alone accounts for 5% of Transnistria's GDP, exporting to 28 countries worldwide.
Champagne for girls and cognac for guys. Cognac. Tastes good. Cognac with cola.
For 10 bottles, Yulia pays 800 Transnistrian rubles, about 50 euros. The Transnistrian ruble is the enclave's official currency.
Plastic or?
Yeah, it's plastic. Plastic money.
This currency has no value at all outside Transnistria's borders.
Спасибо большое.
This money will go straight into the coffers of Sheriff, a powerful conglomerate that controls 40% of the enclave's economy. In addition to a monopoly on alcohol production, Sheriff owns a caviar factory, supermarkets, banks and gas stations. The company also owns Transnistria's only private TV station and a soccer club, FC Sheriff Tiraspol. Viktor Gushan, a 59-year-old oligarch, is the face, at the head of this holding company. He's a man of the shadows. This photo is one of a few images released to the public. A former KGB agent, he is seen here on a separatist armoured vehicle, lending them a hand in 1992. Since then, he has become the Kremlin's right-hand man, the one Moscow relies on to keep Transnistria under control. On the banks of the Dniester River, Yulia meets up with her friends. For 25 Transnistrian rubles, or €1.80 per person, they can treat themselves to an hour's boat ride.
Девочки, берите все стаканчики, сейчас будем наливать. Открой шампанское и разливай всем девочкам, пожалуйста.
Yulia's friends are between 24 and 34 years old, working as tourist guides, agronomists, pharmacists, designers and saleswomen. They often have a series of small jobs.
Скажи, пожалуйста, что работа такая, что не особо в танце. Привлекать к танцам или как-то что-то так. Только не говори, что я работаю заправщиком, конечно.
25-year-old Andrei is an electrical engineer. As he can't find a job in his field, he works as a gas station attendant, earning €350 a month.
Работаю на фирму Шериф. Шериф – это, если вы знаете, что это такое, это есть футбольная команда Шериф. Это все в целом одна и та же команда.
Sheriff offers slightly above average salaries, but for Andrei that's barely enough.
Если жить красиво, скажи, чтобы жить красиво, хотя бы минимум 500. Минимум 500 евро.
So Andrei,
Скажи, что в Приднестровье, слышь, Юля, переведи, что в Приднестровье очень мало.
Vadim, 32, is a former professional dancer. Since the invasion of Transnistria's neighbour, Ukraine, he's worried about the future.
I won't speak about the politics things, but it's not quiet here right now, so we're afraid about World War III. A little bit stressful, so we are ready all the time.
what does it mean to be ready?
Ready to move.
So it
To
means
move.
that you have one bag with
Leave everything.
Every year, 1/3 of 18 to 29-year-olds leave the separatist republic to study or work abroad. Since its creation 30 years ago, Transnistria has lost 40% of its population, but here it's fashionable to say you love your country.
Я люблю свою страну. Я люблю свою страну. One love. Transnistria, one love.
In this pro-Russian enclave, it is unthinkable to question Transnistria's autonomy, let alone to criticize the government. Behind this sanitized decor lies an authoritarian state. No free press, no opposition, and a president elected with 87% of the vote. In the Supreme Soviet, half of the 33 deputies hold high-level positions with sheriff. The famous enterprise headed by former KGB officer Viktor Gushan. Tiraspol, the capital, is home to most of the enclave's industrial plants. It's a fairly wealthy modern city. The same cannot be said of the countryside, which is in poverty. These areas have gradually emptied out since the fall of the USSR, and people live mainly off agriculture.
We're going to my parents' place. I'm very close with my parents, so it's just small farm for my parents, so we could eat healthy food. It's nice to come back sometime.
Yulia's village is 10 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Krasnesko has 1,800 inhabitants, 1,000 less than 10 years ago. Twice a month, Yulia comes to visit her parents. This is where she grew up, surrounded by farm animals. Her parents live off a plot of land and a few animals.
It looks like they are hungry, but they have food here. These old goats, they're growing so fast. Yeah. It's just my friends, you know, it's a part of our family now.
2 goats and 2 cows are their only means of subsistence.
Скільки молока?
Деякі від коров. У нас 2, одну ще одна має мати, он де там. Тільки для нас, для сім'ї. Он там
Just for our family.
Edik, her father, has been unemployed since 2016. For him, the good old days go back to the USSR, when there was work for everyone, from the age of 12.
возили на машинах, на грузових машинах возили на роботу, співали люди, весело було. А зараз он тишина.
There were 2 factories nearby. One was a poultry packing plant, and the other an armaments factory. Most importantly, there was a kolkhoz, which employed 2,000 people. A kolkhoz is a kind of state agricultural cooperative. They were created from 1928 throughout the entire USSR, following the collectivization of land. The one in Krasnesko covered 3,200 hectares.
Склади.
Edik and his wife were employed here as construction workers.
Удобрення було все там. А тут смінник. Тут відборну пшеницю, кукурузу, все протравлювали тут і потім вже по полям сіяли.
Edik started working here when he was 17. He was paid with grain from the harvest and 180 Soviet rubles a month. When the kolkhoz closed in 1991, a whole way of life disappeared.
Друзей було, да, в колхозі?
Всі були практично друзі між собою. Ностальгія, звісно, є. У всіх. Жили хорошо. За нас думало государство. А зараз за нас ніхто не думає. Самі.
Edik isn't the only one in his village who's nostalgic for the Soviet era. Every year on the 25th of March, the villagers gather to commemorate the liberation of Krasnesko in 1944 by Stalin's troops.
Семейного благополучия, крепкого здоровья, а нашему родному селу, нашему родному Приднестровью.
The teenagers perform Soviet dances to the crowd of villagers gathered in the village square. For the occasion, the boys are dressed in Red Army uniforms.
Нести государственный флаг Приднестровской Молдавской Республики и знамя Союза Советских Социалистических Республик.
The trauma of the Nazi occupation between 1941 and 1944 is still very much alive in Transnistria. Nikolai, a former Red Army lieutenant colonel, reminds the villagers of the horrors of the early days of the occupation. Yet he has no memory of them. He was just 1 year old in 1941.
Если не большинство. Как началась война, здесь сразу нам прибыли немцы. Они искали коммунистов или тем, кто сочувствовал советской власти. И без разбору хватали, бросали, расстреливали и уходили дальше.
At the end of the ceremony, Nikolai and Yulia take a short detour to the village's only convenience store.
Больше ведра не пью, но надпиваю заметно.
He makes a point of toasting and offering her a glass of cognac, from Kvint, of course.
Замерзла, говорит, не хочу. Такая большая не хочет.
After a few drinks, Nikolai is quickly caught up in his obsessions. He can't resist giving Yulia a little lecture in geopolitics, at least his version of the story.
Советский Союз больше всех на свете. Это вы затронули тему, которая решила судьбу не только российского народа, а всего мира. Пока был Советский Союз, было тихо и спокойно. Во всем мире. Разве в советское время были такие войны, локальные или прочие? Не было. Почему? Потому что Советский Союз удерживал всех, кто хотел воевать. А сейчас дали волю американцам. Пока Америка будет бороться за свое главенство на земном шаре, война не кончится.
In Nikolai's black and white worldview, Russia is the great peacemaker and the United States is the devil, responsible for all conflicts.
Спасибо тебе.
Вам спасибо.
Сколько у тебя детей? Будут, не переживай.
Будут, согласны.
Счастливый человек.
Это моя дочка.
Откуда ты знаешь?
Потому що він носи.
ДНК. А от носи, да, ДНК.
ДНК я зробив. Давно.
Все, давай.
Давай, удачі.
The love of the Transnistrian population for Russia is not just explained by the military protection it offers, but also by its unwavering economic support of the enclave. Every year, Moscow supplies 500 million euros worth of gas to the separatist republic. This gas is used to produce electricity in Transnistria, which is then sold to Moldova. Moldova is thus entirely dependent on Transnistria for energy. And every time Moldova makes a move towards the European Union, Russia shuts down the pipeline.
Спасибо, папа. Спасибо большое.
In Yulia's family, they're very grateful to the Russian big brother.
Ми за що Росії живемо. Якщо б не Росія, вже давно румини. Світ, газ, бензин, солярка, енергоресурси у нас намного дешевше.
Convinced by Russian propaganda that their neighbours want to invade the area, Edik and his wife have only one wish: to rejoin the Russian Federation.
Війти в состав Росії. Люди хочуть, давно просяться в состав Росії, щоб Росія забрала, щоб на нас не дивились ні румини, ніхто, щоб нас ніхто тут не захватив. А якщо вони хочуть прийти з нагайками сюди, нас тут уніштожати, як що бендеровці, що ці румини, нам цього не треба. Ми просто хочемо жити і все. Хочемо сидіти за столом з вами, говорити.
Главное мирно.
Мир,
Чтобы
чтобы
везде был мир, потому что война это очень страшно.
Будьте здорові.
Vladimir Putin's political ambition is to bring the populations of neighbouring countries into the Russian fold. And Moldova is not the only country to bear the brunt of this strategy of regional destabilisation.